So again, welcome everybody. I'm Judi Bakke. I'm here in San Diego, California. I've been a part of recovery for over 25 years. I lead a meeting in person on Tuesday nights here in San Diego. And I put this special session together because there is a need to go over the difference in angry and fearful thoughts and angry and fearful temper. So I thought we could have a session on it and then have a roundtable discussion of anybody that wants to bring up any points that they've discovered between the two. So, as I just mentioned, our topic today is clearing up the confusion between angry and fearful thoughts and angry and fearful temper during a Recovery International example. All right, we could go on. So, the purpose of today's special topic is that we know as group members, even ourselves, we can sometimes confuse the terms angry and fearful thoughts with angry and fearful temper. It's like, well, what's the difference? Why am I saying, do I say temper in step two or thoughts in step two? I'm not sure where these two phrases, how they fit in. So hopefully we'll clear up the confusion and we can all be better Recovery International spotters, and we can give better examples. And if any of you are recovery leaders, it's going to help you be able to lead an example and feel a little bit more confident about when and where we say temper versus thought. So we are clarifying the difference today, and we'll understand where each term belongs in the RI four-step method. And like I mentioned, it'll help improve our own examples, and it'll help us better use our recovery tools. We know that recovery is still sticking to what Dr. Lowe advised his patients to do, and that's the strength of our method, that we are still all doing the same thing during all of our meetings, and we're running them the same, and the example period is always the same 4 steps. So I hope that's not very confusing to anybody, but let's see. So as we know, Recovery International example is a 4-step method. In step one, we talk about what happened. And in step one, we want to report a single event or situation that got us worked up. And we keep step one brief and to the point. And we know that we'd like to leave out, that example givers should leave out any unnecessary details and exaggerations, because that can work us back up into the situation again. So we're to report our examples and not to complain. So after step one, we move on to step two, and that's where we report to the group our physical and mental symptoms. And mental and physical symptoms can be very intense, as we know, and we'll go over a little bit about that in a minute. Step three, we go into our spotting of our temper and our using of the Recovery International tools. And then we can also remember, I should have put that on here, but we need to endorse ourselves in step three. And then in step four, of course, is a big endorsement, because you need to describe how you were before recovery and how you reacted to the situation and its resolution after recovery. So hopefully that seeing those differences is a big self-endorsement for you when you give a Recovery International example. I know a lot of times when you hear an example as a leader or a member, sometimes it's just like such a big difference between steps 3 and 4 that you just really can't help but cheer that person for making such a business of their mental health and really getting some gains with recovery. So what we're going to do today is we're really going to just focus on steps 2 and 3. So step two, as I mentioned, we report our physical symptoms to the group. So after step one, which should be brief and to the point and not dramatic, we say, that's when I got worked up, and my physical symptoms were maybe you had muscle tenseness, an upset stomach, sweating or heat. A lot of times people feel that heat in the face, like a blushing, maybe a little trouble breathing, some lightheadedness, restlessness, like you want to leave the room or you just can't feel like you're settling in. And our symptoms can be mild or very intense. So, what you just really want to remember about reporting your physical symptoms are that your focus is on what you felt in the moment. And it was explained to me that we report our physical symptoms and how we felt. So the next time we get worked up, we can see, oh, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable in my stomach, or I'm starting to feel restless in my seat. You know that I think I'm getting worked up. What am I? So it kind of gives you like a baseline so that you know the next time when you start to get worked up, you can recognize those physical symptoms because thoughts can go so fast that maybe we don't even realize we're in symptoms. But if you pay it worked up, but if you pay attention to your physical symptoms, that can tell you a lot. So going on to the next slide. So in step two, this is where we report our angry and fearful thoughts. So these are the thoughts that we reveal to the group in step two, all of those racing thoughts that are going through our mind in that moment. So these are our temperamental thoughts. And we know that these temperamental thoughts are usually both angry and fearful. Now, some of us can really able to highlight the angry thoughts quicker than our fearful thoughts. But usually we've found that there's always both angry and fearful thoughts that make up our temperamental thoughts in step during the event. So when we give our thoughts, it's very important to be as honest as we can about our thoughts. Sometimes we want to skip over this part, and just say, yeah, I had some angry thoughts or I had some fearful thoughts and go on to step three. But really, it helps the group spot and if you really explain what you were thinking in that moment, what is it exactly? Are you thinking, oh, I'm late and everybody is staring at me now coming into the room late. I'm embarrassed because I'm late. You really want to try to say what you're thinking at that time. Or you hear a speaker and you go, gosh, that person is so at ease up there in front of the whole group. I'm never like that when I'm in front of a group, or I hope they don't call on me. So it's very important that you can get to the root or the actual thoughts that you're thinking at that time. And in step two, we don't need to analyze our reaction or give it a name. We just want to describe it. We don't have to name it. So we don't need to, we don't spot we're in temper during step two. That comes later in step three. And we don't over dramatize our step two, either our thoughts or our sensations, because remember, Dr. Lowe was, pretty clear about his instructions to his patients. If you stop that complaining habit, the symptoms will start going away. Complaining about our illness and the feelings and sensations that we get, it was a big part of having symptoms and being a nervous patient. So we really don't want to over dramatize. And so what we want to also focus on is what we were thinking in the moment. And sometimes, when you go to give an example, you may not say everything you were thinking at that time or everything you were feeling at that time. That's understandable, but you really kind of want to dig down and try to really get some of those thoughts out there to the group and try to get some of those feelings identified in your body, your tense muscles, or is it an upset stomach that you have, or do you feel blushing a lot? So we really want to try to emphasize that people identify and report to the group those things that we were thinking and feeling in the moment. So then again, in step two, we would talk about our angry and fearful thoughts. And we just put a few down here. I mean, these, just are examples of what you might say to the group or what the group you might hear as a member listening to somebody else's recovery example. But people might say, oh, how could I have said that? I am so embarrassed. That might be something you report to the group. I'm so clumsy. I can't believe I spilled my water glass, at the table. You might be at a luncheon or something. Everybody must be looking at me, if you come in late or do something, or I messed up, I might lose my job here. Some of those big links that we have, like work and school and money and things like that. You might have these deep-seated worries about things, and you just want to try to pull those out and tell the group those thoughts when in step two. We might be able to identify some angry thoughts like that guy is so rude, or she doesn't know what she's talking about. This is unacceptable, and I should complain to the manager. These are just some kind of thought. These are just examples of thoughts that we would reveal to the group. And these are the thoughts that go through our mind, during that step one. There's no right or wrong type of thoughts that we have, so don't feel like you're going to say something that nobody's ever thought before. I mean, everybody we all share the same nervous system, so whatever whatever you thought in that moment, feel pretty confident that somebody else has thought something similar in a situation that was similar or would invoke the same types of thoughts. So don't feel embarrassed or feel that you're not saying the right thing, because we're all pretty much the same. So what's important here is that in step two, we don't spot that we're in temper. See, these are two examples of angry thoughts and fearful thoughts. We're not telling the group, I was so mad at him, I couldn't believe it. We don't need to label our temper in step two. So the step two is just describing everything to the group. We're not spotting on anything or identifying anything. We're just describing it. The word that we read in the 4 steps is report. Report a single event. So we're just reporting what we were thinking and feeling in that group. So we don't label it or say we're an angry or fearful thought. So you try not to say I was angry or I was fearful. So that's kind of helpful for you to, you know, because I think that people, if you say that, I was really mad, that one in the book in Mental Health Through Will training, when the mother asked the son to mail the letter, if he would have just said, oh, I was so mad at her, and then moved on in the example, we would never have that rich background. Oh, she can do it herself, but she always tries to be domineering. That was, what he thought that his mother was trying to do. So remember, if you just say you were mad or angry, we're not getting what you're thinking. Why were you mad? I mean, if somebody asked you to mail a letter, that's nothing to get angry about. But then in that example in the book, he talks about how she's tries to be domineering and things like that. So that's why you want to bring up step two. I mean, bring out your thoughts during step two rather than just your, labeling it as anger or fear or your fearful temper. I think, maybe you're excessively worried that about finances. And so you would want to explain those thoughts that are running through your brain during step one that are getting you into symptoms, instead of just say, oh, I'm fearful. So that doesn't really help the group. It doesn't really help you understand what some of your angry and fearful temper really is all about. We want to get down to the root of it. So what we do in step 2 is we report our racing thoughts honestly to the group. And we can include temperamental thoughts such as she always does this, or what's wrong with him. That's kind of those temperamental thought. This is the worst situation ever, because the group or even yourself can spot the sabotage in step 3. But if that's how you were feeling and thinking during step 2 or when the event occurred, then you want to report on that. And we know we don't use any extreme language or anything that's any cursing or anything like that. But if you have thoughts like this is always happens or this is the worst, go ahead and express that to the group. So we talked a lot about reporting our thoughts, our angry and fearful thoughts, and our feelings and sensations. So now we're on step 3. So I hope this is it's making sense to everybody. We're going to have a couple of practice sessions after the slides are over. So if you have any questions, we'll get to that in a minute. But step 3 is when you finally realize that you're in temper, right? Because you're stopping for a moment and you're starting to spot. So this is when you spot your angry and fearful temper. Because up to this point, you're just kind of going with your reaction to the situation or the person, the event. So step 3, this is the step where our insights are reported, right? This is when Dr. Lowe in recovery language really step in to help us. So we realize our emotional states and report to the group, I am angry with him, or I'm angry at her, or the situation. I finally spotted, hey, I have angry temper, or I have fearful temper. I was fearful I was wrong. And that's, why in step 1 you got worked up. So step 3 is really that point where recovery kicks in and we realize that we're in temper, and we know that temper can be, I think the next slide is the different types of angry and fearful temper. I think most of these are on our 4-step method. We have, or on the concept review, you can have these descriptions of the different types of fearful temper. An example giver may or may not use these words that are given to us, but it's very kind of helpful that there's different types of fearful temper or angry temper. They range in intensity, and fearful temper may appear as embarrassment, or you may be worried about the future or worried about the situation won't get resolved, or maybe you're discouraged. I cleaned the floor. My kitchen floor right now is dirty. So let's say I clean the floor in the kitchen. I'm pretending I'm going to clean it. And then I spilled something tonight when I was making dinner, so that could be like a discouraging thing. Like, how can I be so clumsy after I spent all that time cleaning? Or you might feel hopeless. This situation is never going to change. It's always going to be like this. So those are the types of fearful temper we may experience when we're in that event. And then the other side, of course, is the angry temper. And it may appear as maybe some types of resentment against others, or maybe the situation, or impatience that, something's not getting resolved, or disgust or hostility. These are all types of angry and fearful temper. And again, don't feel, shy about revealing these things, because we all have the same nervous system, and every thought or feeling has probably been felt and thought by somebody throughout time. So don't feel that you feel embarrassed or that you don't want to reveal something about yourself. So it's when we can really the more honest we are in a recovery meeting and giving an example, the better that you'll get. You'll be able to do better spotting for yourself, and the group will really be able to spot for you. And, sometimes when you reveal something, a person in that meeting might go, "Oh my gosh, I felt like that. I didn't know other people did." And you're really making a difference in the life of somebody in somebody else's life by being honest in your own example. So um, that's what we do in step 3 is spot our tempers. So what we do is we use our tools, right, during step 3. So we share the tools and the spots that we used. Some of us have been in recovery for a long time. We might have a huge encyclopedia of spots in our mind. Others may just want to have a couple of spots that they like, and spots can be regional too. I heard somebody say this the other day on a Zoom meeting because maybe a spot is very popular. You hear it at several meetings you go to on the East Coast, but here on the West Coast, maybe we haven't heard it as often. So we want to share those tools and spots. And the tools and spots that we use will reduce our temper. And that's why we come to our meetings and help us regain control. We don't want to be, every act of self control leads to self respect. We want to be able to bring our emotional state back to normal, for lack of a better word. So why this happens, it's because we are spotting on our example. We're reframing the event. It's something that we can just report. It's not an emergency anymore. It's not a disaster. We can take all those words out of it. We're going to reframe it as just a simple everyday event that happens every day. It's a triviality. And what we're doing is we're changing our self-talk. We come to recovery and talk about trivial things, but if you can get a handle on trivial things that you up, you know that you're going to be able to handle some of the bigger things. I've seen that, myself, some of the bigger events that may not be appropriate for a recovery meeting. I've been able to apply recovery tools and get my nervous system to calm down and back to the way it was. So the key distinctions between step 2 and 3. In step 2, our thoughts is what runs through our mind, right? This is completely without any description words that being applied or identifiers as temper. And then step 3 is when you do talk about your temper, and that's the emotional state we identify. So recovery really is a simple method. It's simple but not easy. And we know the formula that thoughts will lead us into temper, but spots lead us out of temper. So we know that, it's our racing thoughts that get us into trouble. It's not the event, but it's our attitude towards it, right? Because people can have similar events and they can have a totally different response to the event. It's what you think about in that moment that leads to temper. Why are we here today listening to me go on and on? So the clear examples will help the group better understand what your experience was in step 1, and will offer a more useful tools to you as the example giver. You can listen to the tools and maybe hear things that are a little bit more in depth or can help you. And they can also help you find the sabotage in your example. So better clarity in your RI example equals better recovery. So that's a good slide to remember. Better clarity gives better recovery. So you come home from work and you find a pile of dirty dishes in the sink left by family members, and you can see the dishes there. So we're going to take us off of slide view, and we're going to talk about what some of our thoughts would be in that moment.
Yeah, maybe thoughts like, everyone in his family is so lazy and they're just, why are they leaving it all for me to do? I have to do everything here.
Yeah, I've told them I'm just going to leave them there.
That I can't believe this is happening.
My thought was, this always happens. This is not the first time. This keeps happening.
For me, why does this always have to happen to me?
That's a good one. You're stuck in traffic and you're late for your doctor appointment that took you months to schedule. And how do you think, what might your thoughts be, and what might your temper or emotions be in a situation like that?
I'm going to be late and I'm going to be thrown out of the practice. They're not going to see me again.
They won't see me and I'll have to wait months for another appointment.
Yeah, I would probably be saying, why can't traffic move faster?
Why didn't I leave 10 minutes earlier?
Why am I always running late?
Okay, yeah. What are they going to think of me when I get there? They're going to look at me like, here she is again, she's late. Embarrassment.
I would be very angry at the holdup and think there's somebody way up there in front of me that has done something to hold up the traffic, and I would be very angry at them.
Okay, well, I hope everybody was enjoyed today's discussion, and I hope people feel they have some clarity, and I hope everybody's endorsing for coming. And I was glad to see everybody's smiling faces today. Have a good night.